It started with silence, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost alive. Outside, rain fell against the thin windows of Amy Slaton's small Kentucky home. But inside, it was another kind of storm that was brewing. Amy sat on the edge of her couch, clutching her phone in trembling hands, staring at the message that had shattered everything she thought she knew about her husband, Brian Lovvorn. The house felt too small, too quiet, too full of ghosts from better days. Toys from her children were scattered on the carpet. Half-packed boxers leaned against the wall, and a half-empty soda can sat beside a stack of unopened bills. Life had been messy for a while, but this was something different. She had seen the signs, of course. The long nights when Brian didn't come home, the distant look in his eyes, the money that vanished from their account without explanation. But denial is a strange thing. It lets you believe the lie because the truth feels unbearable. Amy's voice cracked as she whispered to herself, He promised he'd change. From the bedroom came the sound of her youngest child stirring, and Amy quickly wiped her tears. She couldn't fall apart now. Not yet, not until she did what she knew had to be done. The story of Amy and Brian had once been full of laughter and hope. They were high school sweethearts to people who believed love could conquer anything. But years later, as the pressure of fame, weight loss struggles, and family drama mounted, something in Brian began to break. He started staying out late, first with friends, then alone. Soon, there were whispers in town, whispers about pills, shady friends, and nights that ended in chaos. Tammy had warned her. Amy, she said one night, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Amy didn't want to believe her sister. She wanted to believe in love, in loyalty, in the man she once knew. But that illusion collapsed the night she found a small bag hidden in his jacket pocket, a bag filled with something she'd never thought she'd see in her home. She remembered her hands shaking, the weight of the discovery hitting her like a physical blow. The realization that her husband, the father of her children, had been using drugs for months while pretending everything was fine. When she confronted him, the house exploded in shouts and slammed doors. Brian denied it at first, then turned angry, his voice booming through the walls. You think you're perfect, Amy? You think just 'cause you're on TV you can judge me? Amy's eyes filled with tears. This isn't about the show. It's about our family. But Brian didn't listen. He pushed past her, the smell of alcohol on his breath. That night, Amy sat awake until morning, scared not for herself, but for her kids. She had seen that look in his eyes before, the one that meant danger was near. Days later, things only got worse. The more Amy tried to reach out, the more distant Brian became. He missed his shifts, spent hours locked in the car, and started blaming Amy for his problems. When she found bruises on her arm after one of their arguments, something inside her broke. That's when she called her sister Tammy. The two sisters sat in the living room that night, the TV flickering silently in the background. Tammy had lost weight, her health improving, her confidence growing, but seeing Amy like this hurt her deeply. You don't deserve this, sis, Tammy said, her voice trembling. You got kids to think about. You can't let him destroy you. Amy nodded, her lips quivering. I thought he'd get better. Tammy reached across the table and took her hand. You've been fighting for everyone else your whole life. Maybe it's time to fight for yourself. Those words stuck with Amy. For the first time, she realized she wasn't weak for walking away. She was strong for even surviving. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Brian came home late again, stumbling through the door, mumbling something about his phone being dead. Amy could tell he was high. His eyes were glassy, his speech slurred. She tried to stay calm, but when she mentioned calling the police, something in him snapped. He grabbed her wrist hard, his voice rising. You'll regret that. That was it. The fear, the heartbreak, the exhaustion, it all collided in one moment of clarity. Amy yanked her arm free, ran to the kitchen, and grabbed her phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed 911. Double quotes, 911. What's your emergency? Her voice cracked. It's my husband. He's out of control. Please, send someone. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Brian paced the living room, muttering under his breath, while Amy stood by the door, clutching her children close. When the police finally arrived, the flashing red and blue lights illuminated everything she had been trying to hide, the broken trust, the shattered peace, the truth. Brian was handcuffed and led outside. Amy stood in the doorway, silent tears streaming down her face as her neighbors peeked through their blinds. She didn't care what they thought. For once, she wasn't hiding anymore. Tammy arrived soon after, wrapping Amy in a tight embrace. You did the right thing, she whispered. But Amy didn't feel strong. She felt empty, like a part of her had been ripped away. Later that night, After the officers left and the kids finally fell asleep, Amy sat alone at the kitchen table. The clock ticked softly. She looked around the quiet house and whispered to herself, maybe this is how healing starts, by finally saying enough. Little did she know, that moment, the one where she chose peace over pain, would change not just her future, but her sister's too. Because in the days that followed, the Slaton family would face truths that no camera had ever captured. The night after Brian was taken away, the world outside Amy's window kept moving. But inside that little house in Dixon, time stood still. The flashing police lights were gone, the shouting had stopped, and all that remained was a quiet so sharp it almost hurt to breathe. Amy sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dent in the wood where Brian once slammed his fist during an argument. She traced her finger along the edge, trying to remember the man he used to be, the one who used to bring her flowers from the grocery store, who danced with her in the living room when no one was watching, who promised her a forever that didn't end like this. Her phone buzzed again, texts from producers, from her sister Amanda, from fans who somehow already knew something had happened. In this world, privacy vanished faster than forgiveness. She didn't even need to post anything. The neighbors had already shared videos of flashing lights, tagged her name, and speculated wildly. Amy Slaton calls cops on her husband. The headlines read, "Trouble in Paradise." Another wrote. Amy turned the phone face down. She didn't want to read the comments. Not tonight. Tammy sat across from her, still wearing her oversized hoodie, a cup of cold coffee in front of her. For once, she was the strong one. "You need to get some sleep," Tammy said softly. "I can't," Amy whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear him yelling." Tammy's eyes softened. "You did what you had to do. He made his choices." Amy nodded slowly, but the guilt lingered. It wasn't easy calling the police on someone you once promised to love forever. It wasn't easy explaining to your kids why daddy wasn't coming home. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the blinds, harsh and unforgiving. Amy turned on her phone and opened social media. Her notifications exploded, hundreds of messages, some filled with sympathy, others with judgment. "You're so brave, Amy," one wrote. "You should have left him long ago." Another sneered, "All for clout. Anything for the cameras." She dropped the phone, tears welling up. "They don't know," she whispered to herself. "They'll never know." A knock came at the door. Her brother Chris, holding a brown paper bag. "Brought you breakfast," he said, trying to smile. "I didn't know what you'd eaten." Amy managed a small smile. "Thanks." He sat down beside her and sighed. "Look sis, I know it feels like the end of the world right now, but maybe it's the start of something better. You got your kids, you got us, you got a whole life left." Amy looked at him, her eyes tired. "It doesn't feel like it. I feel like I failed." Chris shook his head. "You didn't fail. You fought, and that's what matters." Later that day, Amy received a call from the county police. Brian had been officially charged with possession and assault. Hearing it out loud sent a chill through her. It was real now. There was no going back. She thanked the officer and hung up, her hand trembling. That evening, as she sat outside on the porch, Tammy joined her with 2 cups of sweet tea. "You know," Tammy said, staring out at the dark sky, "I used to think I'd be the one who'd fall apart first. But look at you. You're stronger than you know." Amy smiled weakly. "You really think so?" "I know so," Tammy said. "You took your life back. That's brave as hell." The sisters sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of crickets and the hum of the distant highway. It had been years since they had had a quiet moment like this. No cameras, no interviews, just them. 2 sisters who had been through more than most could imagine, finding comfort in the shared weight of survival. As the days turned into weeks, Amy began to rebuild. She focused on her kids, on therapy, on cooking healthy again, and on keeping herself busy. The producers from TLC called her often, asking if she'd talk about what happened on camera. At first, she refused. "It's too raw," she said. "I'm not ready." "It's too raw," she said. "I'm not ready." But then one evening, after putting her boys to bed, she sat in front of her mirror, watching her own reflection. She saw the same face she'd seen for years, tired, scarred by life, but still standing. She realized maybe telling her story wasn't about fame. Maybe it was about healing. The next day, she called TLC back. "If we're gonna tell it," she said, "we tell it right. No just the truth." When filming resumed, viewers noticed something different in Amy's eyes. Gone was the bubbly laugh she used to hide behind. This was a woman who had lived through pain and come out stronger. The crew followed her as she packed away Brian's clothes, repainted the living room, and read bedtime stories to her kids. It wasn't glamorous, it was real. And that's why people couldn't look away. Tammy stood by her side, through it all, showing a version of herself no one had seen before. Protective, patient, even nurturing. When producers asked Tammy about her sister's situation, she didn't hold back. Amy deserves peace, she said. She's been fighting for everyone else her whole life. Now it's her turn. That episode broke records. Fans flooded social media with messages of support. Some said Amy's courage helped them leave toxic relationships of their own. Others simply wrote, "You're not alone." Still, the nights were the hardest. There were moments Amy woke up reaching for the empty space beside her. There were times she replayed the good memories, the laughter, the road trips, the moments before everything fell apart. Healing wasn't linear. It was messy, painful, and slow. One afternoon, while filming, Tammy noticed Amy zoning out. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked. Amy nodded. "Yeah, sometimes I just wonder if he'll ever change." Tammy looked at her quietly. "Maybe, but that's not your job anymore." Something about that hit Amy deep. For the first time, she stopped trying to fix someone else and started focusing on herself. As fall turned to winter, Amy's strength grew. She laughed more with her kids, started posting lighthearted videos again, and reconnected with old friends. But one day, out of nowhere, Brian called from county jail. Hearing his voice sent her heart racing. He apologized, or at least tried to. "I messed up, Amy," he said. "I need help." Amy's voice trembled, but she stayed calm. "I hope you get it, Brian, for your sake, but I can't be the one to save you this time." There was silence on the line. Then he whispered, "Tell the boys I love them." "I will," she said softly, and hung up. That night, Amy didn't cry. She sat on the porch again, the cool wind brushing against her face, and realized something. She had survived. Weeks passed, then months. The chaos that had once filled Amy's home was replaced by something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The house was quieter now, but it wasn't lonely. Her kids laughed more. The walls seemed brighter, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. She wasn't waking up to arguments, to uncertainty, to fear. The shadows of those nights were still there, but they didn't control her anymore. Sometimes, Amy would catch herself standing by the window, watching her boys play in the yard, and she'd think, this is what freedom feels like. No cameras, no pressure, just a mother and her children building a new life from the pieces of the old one. Tammy visited often, her presence a constant reminder of how far they had both come. Gone was the sister who once felt trapped and hopeless. Tammy had changed. She had found her strength too. She had fought her own battles, faced her own demons, and now she was using that strength to lift Amy back up. One sunny afternoon, Tammy arrived with lunch and a mischievous grin. "Guess what?" she said, setting down a container of grilled chicken. "Dr. Smith said I'm down another 30 pounds. Amy's eyes widened. "Tammy, that's amazing." Tammy smiled proudly. "Yeah, guess I finally figured out that self-love ain't selfish." The sisters laughed, and for a moment, everything felt like it used to. Two girls against the world, only this time, stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. As they ate, Tammy looked at Amy seriously. "You ever think about forgiving him?" Amy paused, the question hanging heavy in the air. "I don't know," she admitted. "Some days, I'm angry. Some days, I just feel sorry for him. But I think forgiveness isn't about saying what he did was okay. It's about saying I won't let it own me anymore." Tammy nodded. "That's deep. You sound like a whole therapist now." Amy laughed softly. "Nah, I just finally learned to stop giving my peace away." Over the next few weeks, life started to feel normal again, or at least their version of normal. The cameras came back to document their progress, but this time, Amy set boundaries. No filming the kids without permission, no dramatized arguments, no staged tears. She wanted the world to see something real: recovery, growth, and love. And the audience noticed. The new season premiered, and within hours, the internet exploded with messages of admiration. "This is the Amy we've been waiting for," one fan wrote, "a survivor, not a victim." The story of Amy's courage became more than a TV moment. It became a message of hope. News outlets covered her comeback. Interviews poured in. And producers even offered her a special episode, focused on her journey as a single mom. But Amy wasn't chasing fame anymore. She was chasing peace. One evening, after tucking her kids into bed, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the sun dip below the trees. Tammy joined her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. They sat in silence for a while, the golden light washing over their faces. "You ever think about where we started?" Tammy asked softly. Amy nodded. "All the time. That tiny house, all the yelling, all the crying, but you know what? I wouldn't change it. Tammy looked at her, surprised. You wouldn't? Amy smiled faintly. Every bit of pain, every mistake it brought us here, it made us who we are. Tammy let out a small laugh. Who we are? Two strong Kentucky women with enough drama for 10 lifetimes. They both laughed, tears forming in their eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore, they were tears of gratitude. As night fell, Amy scrolled through her phone, stopping on a message she'd received earlier that day. It was from a young woman in another state, a stranger who had watched her story unfold. Thank you, the message read. Because of you, I found the courage to leave my abusive boyfriend. You saved my life. Amy covered her mouth, her chest tightening. She looked at Tammy, who was watching her carefully. What's wrong? Tammy asked. Amy handed her the phone. Tammy read the message, then smiled softly. See, sis, you thought you were just surviving, but you've been inspiring people without even knowing it. Amy blinked back tears. If my story can help even one person, then maybe all of this pain was worth it. The next morning, Amy woke early and took her boys for a walk down the quiet street. The air smelled like rain, the sky still gray with dawn. As they walked, her youngest reached for her hand. Mommy, he said, are you happy now? Amy smiled, squeezing his little fingers. Yeah, baby, she whispered. I really am. The camera crew captured that moment, not for ratings, not for drama, but because it was real. It was peace caught on film. Months later, at a small family gathering, everyone came together again. Amy, Tammy, Chris, Amanda, and the kids. The backyard was full of laughter and the smell of barbecue. There was no tension, no pretending, just family. Chris raised a glass of sweet tea and said, here's to the Slaton family, to new beginnings, to forgiveness, and to surviving the storms. Amy smiled, her eyes glistening, and to never forgetting where we came from. Tammy added, or who we are. As the sun set behind them, casting a warm golden glow over the yard, the sisters stood side by side, watching the kids chase fireflies. It was a simple moment, no scripts, no cameras, no drama, just love. And that's how their story truly began, not with fame or heartbreak, but with strength, healing, and the unbreakable bond between two sisters, who had walked through fire and came out shining brighter than ever. Amy turned to Tammy and whispered, we made it, sis. Tammy smiled, tears in her eyes. Yeah, she said softly, we really did. The camera faded to black, leaving behind the sound of laughter, the hum of summer, and the quiet triumph of two women who refused to give up on themselves, or on each other.